Hello, and welcome back to the studio. I'm Dr. Wiggo, and today we're going to talk about how Apple did in 2025 and how they might do even better in 2026. If you've watched any tech YouTubers' 2025 year in review for Apple, you know that they gave it a pretty bad grade. I think C+, B-, C. They did not grade well. But tech YouTubers are only looking at the products. I'm going to look at more than that. You watch the channel, you know I'm retired, but do you know what I retired from? I was a business school professor. I've been looking at Apple for over 30 years academically, and for the 10 years before that, I was looking at Apple as a journalist for Mac User Magazine. So I might have a little more insight than these people who were only looking at it from the product point of view, because I'll be looking at it from the overall company point of view as well. So how we're going to do this is the next chapter will be the products that were released in 2025, and that'll be kind of long because I have to go through each one and kind of talk about whether they were good or not. Mostly okay. The tech YouTubers didn't get it all wrong. And in the chapter after that, I'll be talking about their market share in 2025, and then the chapter after that, I'll be looking at their financials in 2025. But the big thing is the chapter after that, where I will be talking about why 2026 might be better for Apple than 2025 was. And as you'll see, 2025 wasn't that bad for Apple. Well, let's start with the products. So in February of 2025, Apple announced the iPhone 16e, which was a really good phone. It was an entry level. And a lot of people complain, well, if I buy a 16e, then everybody knows I have the cheap iPhone, whereas when it was the SE that made it special because it was the special edition. Yeah, I don't know if I buy all that, but it was the cheapest iPhone. Then in March, they released the iPad with the A16 chip, which was a spec bump, and the iPad Air with the M3, which was a spec bump, and the MacBook Air M4, which was a spec bump. But also in March, they released the Mac Studio with the M4 Max and the M3 Ultra, and I will link those videos down below where I unboxed and reviewed the Mac Studio, which I still love and use every day. In fact, I'll be editing this very video on it in just a few minutes. Then we get to September, and they introduced the MagSafe chargers, the 25-watt Qi 2 chargers, meh. The AirPods Pro 3, which were a big improvement, but tech YouTubers didn't like this one as much because they said the fit wasn't the same and they sounded worse. Linus Tech Tips went nuts about that. And then, of course, there were all the Apple Watches, the SE3, which was the go-to watch. If you're going to buy a cheap watch, that's the watch. And the Apple Watch Series 11, it's a spec bump. The Apple Watch Ultra 3, another spec bump. The iPhone 17. Now, this was not just a spec bump. The iPhone 17, they brought the ProMotion 120 hertz refresh screens from the Pros down to the iPhone 17. They increased the memory and did not increase the price. I said in my video link below that it was the best deal of any iPhone because you got the Pro features for a lesser price. It was the one to buy if you were looking for an iPhone. And then the iPhone Air, which apparently people didn't like. I love mine. Adore this phone. I think it's one of the best phones I've ever owned. It's pretty, it's elegant, it looks good naked. It's a great phone, but it only has the one camera and a battery, but the battery is not an issue. My battery's at 82% at almost 8 o'clock at night, so there's nothing wrong with this phone. But it didn't sell well for whatever reasons. I think the camera was probably I don't know why. All I know is it's my favorite iPhone I've ever owned. Well, other than the first one because it was special. But looking back, it was kind of crap. But this one, in fact, the rumors are they're not going to release another one this year, and so I may not buy another phone this year because I can't beat this. Oh, and of course the iPhone 17 Pro with the bright orange color and the weird camera bump or plateau. But they went to an aluminum frame for heat dissipation, but that made it more prone to scratches, so there was Scratchgate. It really didn't turn out to be a problem, so don't worry about it if you bought an iPhone 17 Pro. I'll put it in a case if you're worried. Then came October, where we had the iPad Pro M5, another spec bump, the Mac Pro M5 14-inch, which was a weird one because it was a MacBook Pro, but not really, because it was only the 14-inch. And they normally don't put base chips in the MacBook Pro. They put the higher chips, but the higher chips weren't around. Oh, and don't forget the Apple Vision Pro M5 which was a spec bump which made it much better, but it had zero impact on sales. Well, maybe a very slight uptick. I love my Vision Pro. I've been watching 3D movies on it over the holidays, and I will be doing another video about it in the next month or so because I still think it's a great product, even though Apple doesn't agree. So those were the products, and if you look at just the products, yeah, maybe Apple didn't have such a great 2025 because they were mainly spec bumps. There was the iPhone Air, which was a cool new thing and a new design, and nobody bought it, so it was kind of a failure. Although, again, I love mine. So was it a bad year for Apple? Well, let's look at this chart from Counterpoint, where we see that smartphone shipments in 2025 only grew 2%. But Apple was up 10% to number one at 20% market share, followed by Samsung at 19% and Xiaomi at 13%. And Xiaomi mainly sells only in China. What about PCs? Well, year-over-year growth of 11.1% up to 25.6 million units, according to IDC. And the overall PC market was up 8.1% to 284.7 million units. Apple's market share went up to 9% from 8.7%, so just a little blip. And that's fourth behind Lenovo, HP, and Dell. But there's a big difference here. The PC market, as the statistics I just quoted say, is based on units. If you look at profits, Apple PCs have much higher margins. Same for the phones, the previous category. Apple makes better margins. In fact, at one point, this was a few years ago, Apple was getting like 80% of the profits of the smartphone business. And to have a 20% market share worldwide in smartphones is simply amazing. And of course, they make the most profit, followed by Samsung with the most profit. What about financially? This one's a little harder because Apple's fiscal year ends on September 30th. So for Apple, 2025 ended September 30th, 2025. And what we think of as the fourth quarter is actually their first quarter for 2026. And they will have an earnings call on January 29th where they will announce their fourth quarter numbers. First quarter, you know what I mean. But looking at their fiscal 2025, which ended September 30th, iPhone revenue was up 4%. Mac revenue was up 12%. iPad revenue was up 5%. Services revenue was up 14%. Their gross margins were up slightly, but they were offset by some tariffs. Remember tariffs? Their net income was up 20%. Their earnings per share were up 22%. Their cash flow was up 20%. Financially, Apple had a great fiscal 2025 ending on September 30th. And I don't think the numbers we're going to get on January 29th about the first quarter of 2026, which is really the fourth quarter of 2025, I know, I don't think that's going to look worse after we factor all that in. Could they do better in 2026? Let's look at the rumored product releases in 2026. Quarter one, we're expecting an iPad Air M4, spec bump. The iPad with the A18, another spec bump. The iPhone 17e, they do the E models 6 months later, so the 17e will be this year in quarter one. Then in quarter two, we expect the MacBook Pros with the M5 Pro and the M5 Max. We have the one with the M5 that came out in 2025, but it's not really the thing. These would be the things. And a MacBook Air with M5, again, another spec bump. We're expecting a bit more in quarter three, which is a new Mac Mini with the M5 and the M5 Pro, a new iMac with the M5, these again are spec bumps, a Mac Studio with the M5 series, maybe an M5 Ultra, iPhone 18 Pro, the Apple Watch Series 12, the Apple Watch Ultra 4, the iPad Mini OLED. Now that's not just a spec bump, that's a new product, that may sell well. And the iPhone Foldable, or iPhone Ultra, we don't know what it's going to be called. A lot of people are excited about that one. Basically, the Air was the proof of concept that they could make something thin enough that when you folded it over and had two of them, it would be the same thickness as a normal iPhone. Well, they proved it. But wait, there's more. To be determined. These are all rumored products, but these are the ones we don't have any firm rumors of when they might come out. The HomePod Touch with a 7-inch screen, the HomePod Mini 2, the new Apple TV with an A17 Pro. I'm waiting for that one and we'll buy it as soon as it's announced because my Roku is just driving me crazy. And then there's been a cluster of rumors about the MacBook 13-inch with the A18 Pro. So this is going to be like a $600 or $700 MacBook. So sales should be phenomenal because people that want a MacBook and don't want to pay $900, $1,000, if you shop around, you can already get MacBooks for like $750, but this is going to be even cheaper. And the MacBook Pro OLED with possibly the tandem OLED screens like from the iPads. And those are supposed to have an M6 processor, so those could sell like hotcakes. I'm sure they'll be very expensive, but people have been waiting. And the Apple Studio Display too. That's a pretty good product list, especially these ones to be determined, like the cheap MacBook and the MacBook Pro OLED. And the MacBook Pro OLED with the M6 would be amazing. Again, we don't know if that's happening. There have been rumors of a new design MacBook Pro. For the last several years, they've all looked the same. They just put different stuff inside. But maybe starting with the MacBook Pro OLED, they will go to a new design. We can hope. So that's a pretty good product lineup. But wait, there's more. It's only the middle of January, and we've already had some big announcements. Smart Siri is finally coming this year, but powered by Gemini from Google. What? There was an announcement by Google that Apple was buying Gemini, and it'll be run on Apple's cloud servers and on your device, so Google will not have access to your data. And rumors say the first improvements will show up on iOS 26.4 in March or April. And then, of course, the big Smart Siri that they announced 2 years ago never delivered. That will come out at WWDC 2026 this summer. Or maybe not. Again, these are all rumors. We do not know. But if they finally get the Smart Siri, I left out another dud of 2025, liquid glass, but I like it, so I didn't think that was a failure on Apple's part, but many of you probably do. One thing we working against Apple in 2026 is they are still TSMC's biggest customer, but NVIDIA is coming on strong, and all the rumors and the pundits are saying that Apple will not be driving TSMC and may not get dibs on TSMC's new technology as they shrink to smaller and smaller process sizes. And another thing announced this month was that the Apple Card will be moving from Goldman Sachs to JP Morgan Chase in 2027. So don't worry. And as a consumer, if you have an Apple Card, it's not going to affect you in any way. I don't think, but we'll find out. So that's my look back at 2025 for Apple, which was a good year, even if the products were mainly kind of 20% jumps and all sorts of financial things. They're doing fine. Don't worry about Apple. But I think 2026 could be an even bigger year. Let's not forget memory price jumps. While Apple doesn't do RAM sticks like PCs, they still need memory chips to go in there for their unified memory, so they could get hit. Although, as several tech YouTubers have pointed out, Apple was already charging the current memory prices for memory back then, so they may not have to raise their prices. They may be able to hold tight on prices because their margins were so huge on memory. They may be able to eat the increases and not pass it along to us. I wouldn't count on it because it's Apple, but you never know. So that's my wrap up. I think 2025 was a ho-hum year for Apple, although financially they did quite well. Investors always want more from Apple, but there's a reason their market cap hit $4 trillion before NVIDIA. But I think 2026 could be an even better year. And I'm really looking forward to a new Mac Studio, the MacBook Pro OLED, and that little cheap one. I mean, not for me, I will never buy one, but I think that might really goose the thing. And remember, those PC things I showed you were based on units. If they have a cheaper MacBook, that's going to increase their units. Now, it'll decrease their margins. They may be able to move up to number 3 on PC sales in 2026. We'll see. Well, anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for stopping by. See you next time. Bye-bye. Now I got to go figure out something to talk about next time. Waiting for an Apple announcement. Come on, Apple. Thanks for staying to the end. Bye-bye.